I posted a video a few days ago that went viral about my husband and I and our drug addiction. Next month in February is going to make 5 years that we've been clean. The reason that I'm making this video is to answer a lot of questions that I'm getting in my DMs on Facebook and on TikTok. I really wish that I could answer them all individually, but at the end of the day, they're all pretty much boiling down to the same questions and curiosities. I'm going to cut through the chase before I go into somewhat of a backstory about my drug addiction and where it started and how it all just, took off. A lot of people or young women are wanting to know, how did I do it? How did I get clean? They're suffering with opiate addiction and they just want to know, how did I do it? Some have messaged saying that they go to the methadone clinic, but they want to stop that. Just suffering from bad withdrawals and just wanting to know where to start. Like, what made me quit? How did I do it? From age 19 to age 35, I was heavily addicted to opiates, ranging from anything between Loratab and fentanyl, Oxycontin, oxycodone, Percocet, Dilaudid, morphine, you name it. It all started out with a dentist appointment. At age 19, I got my first cavity, but because I was under the impression that it was a wisdom tooth, the dentist pulled one of my wisdom teeth and gave me a prescription for Loratab. At the time, I was also going through an abusive relationship and just trying to figure life out. I had my oldest daughter. She was a baby at the time, and things just over time just became overwhelming, and I went from taking one here and there every once in a while to just over the years before I knew it, I was just in way too deep. It got to the point that I was buying them off of the streets, went from taking one at a time to two at a time, three at a time, and even 10 at one time. Just over time, your body builds up a tolerance and it happens. It got so bad that whenever I would go to sleep, it was hard for me to wake up. And eventually over time, I started dibbling and dabbling with Adderall, and from Adderall to meth, and it was just a vicious cycle. For me, it was never about partying and just wanting to have a good time and be high. And for a long time, during the early stages of my addiction with pills, I don't even think I realized that I was getting high, if that makes sense. I felt like they, were prescribed by a doctor initially. And so I didn't have any knowledge that they were addicting and that they were going to create a lifetime of problems for me. By the time I realized that it was an addiction and that I was addicted, I was in entirely too deep. It was never about wanting to have a good time and partying and hanging out with friends. For me, I got high because I had bad coping mechanisms, if you will. I have two older siblings. They're 11 years older than me. I have two identical twin brothers. So when I was like age 5, they were older teenagers and they were, beginning to experience life and, getting out and on their own. So it's kind of fair to say that I'm somewhat like an only child and my mother's only girl. I was spoiled, and anytime something didn't go my way, my mom always fixed it. If I came home from school and had a bad day, she took me shopping. It's just always instant gratification there. This story is going to kind of be all over the place. I'm trying to keep it, together, but also a little bit of a backstory on my husband. My brothers are 50 and I'll be 40 in May. My brothers are 50 and my husband is 58. My brothers and my husband have always been friends when I was a child growing up. I've always somewhat kind of knew of my husband. My husband was a truck driver and a big time drug dealer back in the day when I was a child. He didn't live around here, but he was definitely a household name. I just always knew. I can remember being like 11 or 12 and my brother's like, Anthony Fason's coming to town. But like literally he would be here here one minute and gone the next. I was a kid. I never paid much attention. He didn't pay any attention to me. So please don't read any more into this than what I'm saying. But to make a long story short, back then I was a kid. I didn't know nothing about drugs. I didn't know nothing about boys. But my brothers, and my husband, they were, cocaine was a thing back then. So my husband's always kind of like struggled with addiction too, but that was off into like, a whirlwind life before me. And to be honest, his drug of choice for a very long time was crack, but that was before my time, before I was born and when I was a kid. And so over the years, fast forward, when I was in high school, my husband was in prison for dealing drugs. He did federal time, got out, was in, another relationship elsewhere. He had his life, I had mine. I was like a young teenager, young adult. His name had went kind of like came and went in my head. We were literally just living separate lives. Over the years to meth related crimes, just a lot of things that I did that I wouldn't have done hadn't I been on drugs. I actually wound up going to prison for a year. And just being honest, I'm going to say probably about 2 weeks after I got out of prison, I went right back to my old ways, using meth and looking for pain pills. And by that point, fentanyl. Somewhere along the line, me and my husband wound up crossing paths at a drug house, and we've been inseparable ever since. The earlier part of our relationship was based off drugs. I was about 31 or 32 when we met, or when we got together. I should have mentioned this earlier. Like I said, I know this story is kind of going to be all over the place, but I do. I have 2 children. I have 2 daughters. They are age 21 and 18 now. My mom stepped in when my oldest daughter was 5 and my youngest daughter was 3. When my family finally realized that they could no longer, there was nothing that they could do with me, my mom just stepped in and just said, hey, let me raise the kids. Other family members convinced me that they would be better off, and which was probably true at this point. So my mom had always had my children for a long time, but I was always there. I was always around. I always came by and they would come and see me. They had just all lost hope and just accepted me for what I and who I was, a drug addict. At the most, as far as a rehab, the only thing I had ever tried was the methadone clinic. And in all actuality, I had became addicted to those. Just, it was legal. And years after failed attempt with the methadone clinic, and during this part of my life, this was, going back, that was before I had met my husband. And in the year 2011, I had a terrible car accident where I broke my pelvic bone was pushed 2 inches from my heart. I broke my tailbone front and back. I broke my left femur bone, tore a pinhole in my bladder. I broke my left shoulder. I broke vertebrae off my spine. I lost 4 units of blood. I broke my right ribs and punctured my lungs. The car accident was awful, to say the least. I wound up being airlifted to a hospital. They repaired me, put me back together. I was in a wheelchair for 3.5 months, and the doctors prescribed me morphine, and for morphine, they wound up prescribing me fentanyl. At the end of the day, if I had to go back and do it all again, before I met my husband and when my daughters were 3 and 5, I would have bit the bullet a long time ago and disciplined myself and suffered through the withdrawals for about 2 weeks. The physical withdrawals are the absolute worst part about addiction, especially with opioids and fentanyl and just anything in that class. I would have told myself that it'll get greater later, and I just would have toughed it out and told myself that I had the worst case of the flu and pushed through it for me and my children and just in general. When I got with my husband, he did meth and just meth. I was a chronic user with meth, with pills, and it was several times throughout the relationship that he would speak of, he had a desire to want to get clean. But in all honesty, I didn't. It wasn't until we got in trouble, because it was just to a point that I was selling drugs so that we could use drugs. Yes, I know that is horrible, but it's just the truth. But eventually it caught up to us, and I'm glad that it did. I chose to be the one to deal the drugs the most because I knew, me being a woman and him being a man, and especially a black man, if something ever happened, that he would catch it the hardest. So I knew exactly what I was doing. But when it caught up to me and I sat in jail for a while because my bond was so high, it was the first time that my mother couldn't touch me, I finally got some mental clarity and realized that at the end of the day, that I think I was more so addicted to the thought of being high. I was just tired of chasing the high. I was literally just tired. I made bond first, and 2 weeks later, I managed to get my husband out. And I knew at that point that we literally had one chance to get it right. Just something different about this time. I knew that I was done, and I just prayed and hoped that he would be too. Thank God, and I thank my husband that it all worked out. So just quit. Ride the withdrawals out and just quit. Drugs are the biggest scam ever. I know it's hard, but figure out what you need to do and do it so that you can quit.